All right, everyone, welcome back. We are so excited to have you with us. And I noticed that you're looking at the screen thinking, hey, Dave's not there. And that's right. Dave's out in Boston today meeting with some of his clients, but I do have Joel Weimer with us. Joel, welcome to our show today.
Well, thank you, CR. It's really fun. It's a pleasure to be here, and I think we'll have some fun today.
Now, for everyone watching that are here live and on replay, so this is our Q&A. We come on and we just talk about retirement. So I throw a lot of questions at Dave. And so, for example, we have Joel here today. And we encourage you to submit your questions on retirement. And we have a lot of different topics we cover. We talk anything from Medicare, Social Security, long-term care. We talk everything. We even talk about investing sometimes, right, Joel?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the issues that we love to talk about.
And so if you have anything like that, we really encourage you to get those submitted today. And before we go, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about Joel here and just kind of pump him up, because the first thing we have to talk about is he's the founder and owner of Weimer Wealth Management. And he's one of our advisors with our team here. And he's been working in the financial industry for over 30 years and works with hundreds of individuals, families, and business owners, helping them avoid some of the common pitfalls that people experience while they're planning for retirement. The reason we love working with you, Joel, and the reason I hope you guys watching will see, is that we teamed up with him because of his approach in retirement is the same as ours. It's about education. And tell me why, Joel, why that's so important to you.
Well, the educational aspect of what we do is extremely important, and we base all of our client relationship off of that, CR, simply because if you don't understand as an investor, as a retirement, as a retiree, what you're doing and why you're doing it, you're not going to be able to lay your head on the pillow at night and be comfortable. So that's the main reason we educate, and we want everybody to understand exactly what they're doing, why they're doing it, and then they can have a high degree of confidence that they understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish.
And Joel, I did find a great quote that I also love, and this is another reason why I feel like we're such a great team, is you said, I immediately fell in love with the idea of helping people succeed financially. It has been a passion of mine ever since. Talk about why that is such a passion for you.
Well, it's more of a mission, actually, CR, and I believe that I've been given some God-given abilities, and one of those is to help people financially, and that's the reason that I'm passionate about that. So, and if I can do that in an understandable and educational way, then I think that just allows me to utilize my talents to help more and more people as I go through my career, and that's why I'm very passionate about it. It's why I view it as kind of my mission field going forward.
And I love that. And the basic point of why we're here, why I started with Dave, is because he was all about education, making sure we get the right information out to the right people and make sure that we're really trying to help people. This isn't about just collecting a paycheck or getting some type of compensation. This is really helping people make the best decisions. And that's why we come on and do these Q&As. So when people come here, they can leave, like you said, they can put their head on their pillow at night and feel good about it. But also we can, and they can together as a team, and we can say, hey, we put our best effort out. And that's why we're here to talk about this and to help educate.
And that's exactly, I love that team analogy. That's what this is. It's a team project. It's a team exercise when you work with clients and educate them. So if everybody's not on the same page, on the same team, then somebody gets squeezed out in that situation, and it's usually the client, not the advisor. So yeah, we want to make sure that they're having the best experience they possibly can.
Exactly. And again, for everyone watching live, thank you so much for being here. And please go ahead and submit your questions, or even just say hi to Joel and give him a wave and let us know where you're watching from. That's always fun to see where everyone's coming in from. And Joel, you're based out of Ohio, correct?
Yeah, Kent, Ohio, infamous Kent State University, probably known for all the wrong reasons back in the early 70s. But that's where we are. I've lived here my entire life. It's a great area, but a lot of times when you say Kent, Ohio, people, just go to that thought, that Kent State tragedy that happened.
Yeah, I understand that. So I'm down in Georgia. I moved from Utah. And so I tell people as we're on here, the studio changes a little bit. I'm at home. So once in a while you hear my dogs going crazy. And Joel and I talked before the show. It's about being real. I think some of the things we need to realize as we're into this, it's all about making sure we're here, we're saying hi, and we're being real. And Dave, Gary is on our show today, Joel. So I just wanted him to say hi. And
good morning, Gary.
Gary is one of our favorites. He's here every week. He's been so helpful. He's got so many great questions. So if I could have something pick out, what's something you really, I know you're passionate about helping people in retirement, but is there a specific area right now you just said, man, I just really would love to help people in this particular area to guide them more?
Yeah, I think the area that's really on a lot of people's minds now, simply because the baby boomer generation exists and they're now moving into the retirement arena, the area that's on most people's mind would be twofold: income, how to get the money out of a lot of the accounts they've saved in over the course of their working years on a tax preferable basis, and then also kind of marrying that with the investment planning, because we're in a pretty difficult time as far as economics and investments have come through the last 18 months or so, and we really want to help people understand what those two things, how they affect them going through the retirement process.
Well, that's awesome. And again, that's why you're here, so we can have people jump on if they have any questions, especially as we're diving in through these questions, that they can come on and ask something very specific and see if we can help kind of guide them in the right direction, because really that's what we're here to do, is educate and guide them in the right direction so they make the best choices for them in their retirement. And I think that's, again, the focus of this. And so I don't want anyone to ever get distracted of why we're really here.
Excellent. Excellent. I agree.
Okay, well, let's dive into some questions we have here. And again, I want to thank you again for being here live and on replay. And if you have questions, you can always get those submitted to us at theprosperityguy.com or the retirementriskadvisors.com. Let's pull up our first one here. And Joel, before I get everybody into this, I want to kind of preface that a lot of times we get to come on and do these big 4-hour webinars together. And so we had the privilege of doing that recently. And so I gathered some of these questions from some of these webinars we've been a part of. And so that way we're kind of getting a back history of some of these. And also we'll pull questions from other areas as well. But I just want to give a backstory as we're getting that pulled up here before we get into Donna's question. And Donna's asking, you are using IRA. Does that apply to such as 401k, 457, etc.? Also, do you have all to be added together?
So that's a really good, and we get some great questions in those 4-hour webinars, like you mentioned, CR. So really intelligent audiences. So, and I think what she's referring to here is when you're getting into that period where you're forced to take out a required minimum distribution starting at age 72. So the answer to this question would be yes. You have to total up all of those types of accounts, all your tax deferred assets, and then you would be required to pull out a certain percentage of those in a required minimum distribution. So a quick example: if all your tax deferred assets totaled up to $1 million and you were at the age of 72, or you required them to take a minimum distribution, that first year's percentage would be 3.91%. So in that case, you would be forced to pull out $39,100 of distribution and pay tax on that money when you pulled it out. So, and then again, it goes up as the years go by, that percentage goes up. So you're forced to take more and more money out of there.
Joel, what areas do you see people making the most mistakes when they're starting to set up each of these accounts?
Well, the biggest mistake we see, and it's not because they were at fault, but the biggest mistake that we see was that they've accumulated more dollars than optimal in each of these accounts. And then that was because the financial services industry didn't keep up with the tax planning and the advice that they should have. So the large mistake is that people have most of their serious retirement money saved in these qualified accounts, and they're going to be forced to withdraw more money than they actually need in most cases if they've done a good job planning. So the tax ramifications are really a problem.
And Joel, kind of in this industry, we talk about these buckets. We have these 3 buckets where we're putting our money in. And maybe tell me a little bit about that bucket system, because as we're kind of diving in here, my question is going to lead to, can we overfund some of these as you're talking about?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So the 3 basic buckets is if we look at this from the eyes of the IRS, how they view the money that we save and accumulate over the course of our working years. So there's three basic buckets that all that money fits into. The first one would be the taxable bucket, which we know it's taxable simply because we get a 1099 at the end of the year and we have to pay tax on that money on an annual basis. The second bucket would be the one we just talked about in the question, which would be tax deferred bucket, or dollars that you get a tax deduction on the way into those accounts, but conversely, you have to pay tax on the way out as you access that money. So things like Donna mentioned, 401k, 457, IRAs, individual IRAs, and so forth. Those are all tax deferred accounts that as you access them, you're going to pay tax on that money coming out. And then the third bucket, which happens to be, you've probably heard me say this before, CR, my favorite bucket of all, the tax-free bucket, which would be something like a Roth IRA or a Roth conversion account that would allow us to pay the tax on the way in minimally, but accumulate dollars on a tax-free basis, compounding over the rest of our life, and also pulling it out tax-free as we go through retirement. So much more valuable than the other two buckets.
And with each of those, like we talked about with this, is we're making mistakes as we're setting up these accounts. A lot of times, is that you kind of alluded to, is we overfund these because we just don't know any better.
There's an optimal amount mathematically to have in the first two buckets, the taxable and tax deferred bucket, and then everything else in a good financial plan should go into that, to overflow into that tax-free bucket. So, and that's what we help clients with. We help them determine what those proper amounts are in each of those taxable and tax deferred buckets so that they can then utilize the tax law to their favor as they go through retirement.
That's great. Well, Joe, let's move down here. So we have about 20 more minutes to go here. So I'm going to kind of move along. We have Cham, and she's asking, is there an advantage for one age 70 to collect Social Security in June of 2021, but still work for about one more year? Will her additional contributions be added to the Social Security benefits?
So that's a really good question. So the answer is, if you start collecting Social Security, and then 70 would be the last age you would probably want to defer to start collecting, because it doesn't grow anymore after that. However, if you do continue to work, those dollars that you make from employment would be added back into the Social Security formula going forward. So if for example, you made more money in that next year than one of your earlier years in the Social Security formula, it would knock out that lower dollar amount. So theoretically, yes, your check could go up based on you continuing to work after you started to withdraw Social Security.
And let me ask, when we talk about Social Security, the reason people take it maybe a lot earlier than 70 is difficult times, or things are happening, or maybe they just aren't taught properly. And so they're just pulling it out. Hey, I'm retired now at 66, whatever. And they're just taking that money, but they don't realize how much money they're still leaving on the table.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, I think the highest percentage of the age-wise that people take Social Security is actually 62. Which in most people's cases is the wrong age to start withdrawing Social Security. But a lot of misconceptions, I think, go into that. Number one is that the program will be broke and there won't be any money going forward. That's probably not. While it could be changed a little bit, it's not going broke, and you will get some form of Social Security. But for most people, the answer is to delay as long as they possibly can, with that caveat of maybe there's a health event that comes along, and that you're not going to live an average life expectancy. So, and if you look at that, you might want to go down and start to file for Social Security immediately to start getting the benefits.
And the one thing we talk about on the show a lot too is making sure that we're not using Social Security for all of our retirement. I think it was 40% that we need to have, but really what's happening is we're using everything. And a lot of times that gets us into trouble as we head toward retirement.
Yeah, it really does. And that's an issue that you have to plan for previous to taking Social Security. It's not just something you can wake up, on your 62nd birthday and make that decision. You have to kind of plan for that a few years before that, and incorporate that into an overall financial plan. But you're exactly right. That some of that is because we don't plan previous to the time that we make that decision, and it can become problematic.
All right. And Joel, I do have Gary jump on. Let's see if we can get his question up here. Maybe see if you can answer this for us. But he's asking, in connection with the ideal amount in the tax deferred bucket, do you believe that the related standard deduction will always be available? And then he's asking why.
Yeah, I really do believe. I think it's always been available, and in fact it gets indexed every year. So one of the reasons is that it's an incentive. Most people now no longer with the latest tax law revision can itemize anymore, and because the standard deduction is so high. Now they may adjust it and go back to a lower standard deduction in the future, but I really feel that Congress feels that's an overall benefit for people and allows them to do some form of tax planning with that standard deduction. So moving forward, I would really hesitate to say it's going to disappear, but it may change its form in some way, shape, or form.
Great. Gary, we hope that answers your question. And if not, please let us know. We'll be happy to do a follow-up question. But thanks for throwing that in, Joel. Now you can kind of see how the live effect is and how great it is to be able to have Gary and other ones on here so they can throw their questions at you as we kind of go through and dissect retirement, if you will.
Yeah, they definitely keep me on my toes here.
Well, let's go ahead and pull up Linda's. Linda's asking, if you have a traditional IRA, does the balance get considered in any way when you withdraw from a Roth IRA?
I think this question goes back to those buckets that we were talking about. So it's what kind of money do you have in each of the buckets? And she's asking, if you make a withdrawal from a traditional IRA, does that affect the money that you might have in that tax-free bucket or the Roth IRA? And no, those are two separate events. So a withdrawal out of the tax deferred bucket gets taxed as ordinary income, which means it gets piled on all of your other income for the year. And then whatever your ending tax bracket is for that year, that's the amount of tax you pay on that withdrawal. That's totally separate from a Roth IRA or that tax-free bucket, which does not affect in any way, shape, or form any tax considerations if you pull money out of that bucket. So those are two separate things, and they don't have any relationship when you make withdrawals out of each of those buckets.
And since we're now bringing up the Roth IRA, I do want to squeeze in one more question about this topic from Maureen. And she's asking, are there limits on rolling over to a Roth from an IRA?
So at one point in time there was, but there was a $100,000 income limit, and you could no longer make a rollover conversion from a traditional to a Roth IRA. But Congress wiped that out. So as we stand right now in the tax law, there are absolutely zero limits on making a rollover from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA or a conversion from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. However, you have to take into consideration the price of admission, which is you have to pay the tax on that transfer when the time comes. So generally, when we help clients do those types of things, we're a little more strategic in how we do that, and we develop a plan for them to make those distributions from one type of IRA to the other kind of more strategically, not do it all at once so they get hit with a major tax consequence.
And as we talk about all these different accounts, as we're kind of diving into everything here, well, what advice do you have for those people who are listening by saying, okay, I need to be able to get something set up for my retirement, and what's the best option, or what approach can I do right now to make sure I'm doing this right?
Well, the best advice is start today. If you haven't started, start today, because there's no better time to do that. You can't feel bad about the fact that maybe you haven't done as much as you wanted to in the past. Today's the day to get started, and then work with someone who understands those optimal balances in each of those buckets and what the consequences are of having the wrong amount in each bucket. And then they'll develop a plan from that point on to tell you how much should be funded into each bucket going forward, so that you don't have any adverse tax consequences that when you want to actually access that money and use it for retirement.
And I did go ahead and put in the chat there as well. If you want to go to retirementriskadvisors.com/Weimer, they'll have an opportunity to fill out a little questionnaire and then have a chance to jump on your calendar and chat with you, especially to be able to talk about this. Because as you're talking about making sure, first of all, we start today, We can't hold on to any of those feelings that I should have done this, I should have, I could have. But really, it's finding the right person that aligns with what they're searching for somebody that can help educate them and get them in the right direction. And so with this, I know you do offer a no-fee consultation where they can jump on and chat with you and talk about getting something set up, because I feel like what we always struggle with is, first of all, we feel awful about it, but then second of all, we don't take action. We just sit back, and then maybe a year or two rolls by, and by then we realized we could have been even putting more money aside.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I think a good advisor, the number one thing they help people do is manage their emotions. And that's what you just talked about, was an emotional decision of feeling bad about previous actions that prohibit you from doing the right thing going forward. And that's where a good educational process from a good advisor can come in, help you manage that emotion and get started on the correct path.
I totally agree. Well, let me get to my next question here from Ronald. Ronald's asking, on the 401k loan, if it for one day I'm going to be able to read on here. It's so small, I just got to put my glasses on and just do it. But on the 401k loan, if it is for personal residences, is it deductible as mortgage interest, and can you do multiple loans?
Okay, so Ronald asked a question where there's a lot of layers to this onion right here. So I'm going to try and get through this and explain this in a way that's really understandable. But so there's two ways you can pull out, if you're talking about personal residence, to use money from 401k plan. Number one is just to make a withdrawal, which he's not talking about here. It's not the way I would suggest doing it, because once you take the money out of that plan, you can never get it back in there. So you lose the compounding for the rest of your life on that. So that's really not an option. It's not what he's asking, but it is one way to do it. The other way would be to pull money out in the form of a loan and use that to either buy or purchase or make a down payment on a personal residence. And that interest that you're paying back, you do pay back. There's a repayment schedule. The interest you pay back is technically to yourself. So you're not paying an institution. So the answer would be no, you can't deduct that as mortgage interest going forward. So that's a downside to that. And again, a lot of 401k plans, once you borrow money out of there, until you put all of the money back in, you're not back fully invested into the market. So you're losing that compounding going forward on the amount of money that you borrowed out of the plan. And then, yes, you can do, if the plan allows it, you can do multiple loans from a 401k plan. There would be a set dollar limit that all those loans could total, though. One red flag that I would say would be something to consider if you did the loan option here to pay for anything, really, not just a home. But if you leave that job, or if you get fired, or you're downsized for whatever reason, whatever remains on that loan would be a taxable distribution for that year. They don't usually allow you to continue paying that loan back if you separate from employment from the company that you have the 401k with for whatever reason. So that can cause a serious tax problem if that happens.
And in your case, Joel, do you see a lot of people that are taking these 401k loans?
We try and discourage that as much as possible, because again, it would be the last option or the last resort. So if there are any other options or any other ways that we can accomplish what they're trying to do, we would try and get them involved in something else before they get to 401k loans, simply for a lot of the reasons we talked about in answering the question.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And I think that's one of the things. It's obviously, with the different times and with COVID and job loss and job change, there's so many things out there that have uncertainty. But I think the best we can do is let our money work for us and not take away from it. And I think those are the things that we're really trying to encourage and get others to really look at. But again, we're here, especially in your case, Joel, is to kind of guide them and make sure that they're making these choices, because today is tough, but tomorrow it's going to be a lot harder.
Yeah, and again, that compounding issue is a major issue. I think Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's lesser known partner, said the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. So, and you're doing that if you pull the money out of that 401k plan, which is an unforced error, as they say in sports, and you don't want to make unforced errors.
Exactly. Well, let's jump down to Catherine here. I'm trying to squeeze in. I know we've got a few from the audience as well, but let me see if I can get a couple in here. Catherine's asking, for a solo 401k, do you have to make contributions every year? And is there a minimum income requirement?
That's a really good question because solo 401ks are becoming more and more popular. So the answer is no, you do not have to make contributions on a year-to-year basis. You set the solo 401k plan up, and then it's just a contribution that you make throughout the course of the year. And the kind of the rules are it's either for a business owner or their spouse. So that and it's much less expensive than a traditional 401k to set up, and that's the advantage of it. But you do not have to make certain contributions on a year-to-year basis. However, there is a rule that if you don't contribute 3 out of 5 years, it can become deemed an inactive plan. Then you have to jump through some hoops to kind of get it back rolling again. So even if you can only make a couple $100 contribution in a year, it allows that plan to remain active, and you don't run into that problem.
And with that one, I do have one more question that's tied with this one from Sumi. Can you set a 401k, a solo 401k as a Roth?
Yeah, that's a good question because Roths are becoming way more popular. More and more companies are adding a Roth option to their 401k. Technically, the answer, Sumi, is no, you cannot. What you have to do, though, is there's always more than one way to skin a cat here. What you do is you set up a traditional pre-tax solo 401k, and then you can add in the Roth option to that plan so that your contributions could then go to the Roth solo 401k.
And we talked about this on different webinars and different shows. A lot of times people are saying, well, how do I get into the Roth world? I mean, a lot of times, even at work, they say, hey, I just have a regular 401k, but how do I get into this? What advice do you have for somebody that's kind of in that world?
The first thing we do is we get on a 3-way call with all of our clients or the people we talk to and talk to their plan administrator, because a lot of times it's about 60 or a little higher percent now of plans that actually offer the Roth option, but it's relatively new. So it may not even be in their plan document yet. So what we do is get on a 3-way call with their plan administrator. We ask them directly, is there a Roth option? And sometimes they get very surprised that yes is the answer. So I think that's the easiest and most straightforward way to find out if there's a Roth option in your 401k plan. Other than that, you can set up a personal Roth IRA and do it yourself outside of work. Or again, if you already have some dollars in a traditional 401k plan, you can set yourself up a schedule to do Roth conversions. And as long as you understand the tax ramifications of those, you can get some money into that Roth 401k or Roth account going forward.
All right, great. Well, let's jump over to Ethel. Holy cow. One day I'll get some of these names right. Do you think the tax increase will happen for 2021?
So I think there's going to be some tax increase, and that one of the popular kind of limits that they're talking about is $400,000 limit for the higher income earners. And I think that portion of any kind of new tax law they pass will be included. But as far as most middle income earners, most of the middle tax brackets that the 2008 Secure Act established probably will be extended for the next 4 to 5 years. So that's actually good news for the middle income earners or middle America. But the higher income earners, that $400,000 over level, will probably see some increase in taxation as a result of some tax laws being passed going forward. The big question would be for those people, is that going to be retroactive back to the beginning of the year? Because then they'll have to deal with that. It's a little more messy situation.
I really apologize if Ethel's with us, because boy, that's hard. I slaughter so many names on here. I tell Dave every time I slaughter all of these. And before we go, I know we're almost out of time, but when are taxes going to increase, or when do we think that that's going to be happening?
So twofold answer there. So as tax law stands today, January 1st, 2026, tax rates will increase for sure. That's just the way tax law is written today. And those brackets, each of the brackets will go up, or I'm sorry, tax rates will go up about 2 to 3% across the board. That, in my estimation, is not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is that the tax brackets shrink significantly at that point in time to the previous tax law, which means not only are you paying a couple percent higher in each bracket, but you're paying that couple percent on more of your money. So that part of it is a little bit lesser known, and you have to really plan for that and protect yourself from that. So January 1st, 2026, as it stands today, there is now in front of Congress kind of Secure Act Point 2 that they're going back and forth on, and there could be some positive and negative tax consequences if that law is passed.
All right. Well, I know I want to be cautious of your time, Joel. So I know we said 30 minutes. So here we are at the time. And I do want to let them know that we do get to see you every month on our webinar that we have, The Changing World of Retirement. And you get to jump on there with Dave for 4 hours. Tell me about this webinar and why it's so important that we have people here.
This webinar is fantastic. And Dave does just a tremendous job. And talk about passion. His job is, his passion is educating people about retirement, the tax laws, and preventing the risk of retirement going forward. But that class takes a really deep dive into much of what we just answered in this 30-minute session. So I would suggest highly that if you want to know more about some of these topics and you want to take a much deeper dive into each of those issues about how to own money, the buckets that we talked about, Roth versus traditional IRAs or so forth, that class would be the one that you would want to log into and take, because it is a 4-hour master class on how to work yourself through your future retirement planning issues.
Yeah, it's a great class. I love being part of it, being the moderator there, and get to work with you and several of the advisors, and especially, like you said, with Dave, the passion he has for education in retirement is just, it's amazing. So I love to be part of that. So, well, Joe, thank you so much for being here, for being part of this. I'd really like to, again, encourage you to get onto that 4-hour webinar. You can find that through theprosperityguy.com. You can go there, go to the events page, and you can sign up for the classes we have there. And then you can obviously get on that calendar to meet with Joel and his team and be able to work with them. Any parting words, Joel, that you have, is everyone's kind of focus and looking into retirement? What's our kind of send off you want to give them?
Just to realize that the traditional way we thought of retirement for the last 20, 30 years is a little outdated now. So in other words, that kind of nest egg philosophy where you saved up enough money, pulled some money off of it, as you went through, maybe supplement your Social Security and your pension if you had one. That's an outdated model now. And it really and the reason being is we used to retire at 64, 65, and life expectancy was maybe 72, 73, 74. So took a lot to mess that situation up. But now retirement's a 25, 30, 35, 40-year math equation. So the strategies have to change, and you have to change with it. So this is the first step. That 4-hour class is the first step of actually starting to understand how it's changed and how you should be changing with it.
Great. Well, again, Joel, thank you so much for being here, taking time to be with us and filling in for Dave as Dave's off in Boston today. I hope he's having a lot of fun out there. Obviously, he's out there working, so he's not out there just playing, but we definitely miss him on the show here. But we appreciate you filling in and talking and sharing your advice, because, again, it's important that those we talk to and those who are part of us, part of our show here, get to see the advisors we work with and hear from them, and to know that we have a really good group here, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I had a blast, so thank you. Let's do it again soon.
Okay, sounds good. And everyone, thank you again so much for being here on our live show. And for those watching on replay, thank you so much. And don't forget to check us out, theprosperityguy.com or Retirement Risk Advisors, and you can sign up for any of those classes, those webinars that we have. And don't forget, we also have the podcast. We've got a LinkedIn show. We've got so many a variety of opportunities out there for you to become educated. And like Joel said, when you meet with him, you really are sitting down and diving into the education side, because as you make better decisions, you'll be able to know why you're part of that retirement system, and not just hand it to you and say, hey, here it is. You're part of that. And that's the best part. So, well, thanks again, Joel. And I hope we get to see you on a future show.
Thank you, CR. Have a great day.
See you, everyone.